The morning I found out what my daughter had been doing to me, I sat in my kitchen for a long time without moving. The papers were spread across the table. The coffee went cold, and I just sat there, reading the same lines over and over, because some things take a while for your brain to accept, even when the proof is right there in black and white. But before I tell you what was in those papers, comment below where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now. I'll be reading every single one. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years teaching high school history in a small town in central Ohio. I retired the spring before last, healthy enough, sharp enough, still walking 2 miles every morning before the sun finished rising. My wife, Carol, passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the day I held her hand for the last time. 14 months is not enough time to say everything you need to say to a person you've spent 37 years building a life with. I don't think any amount of time would have been enough. After Carol died, I did what a lot of men my age do. I got quiet. I kept the house clean because she would have wanted that. I cooked simple meals. I called my son on Sundays. He lives in Portland with his wife and 2 kids. A good man, busy, far away. And I spent more time with my daughter, who lived 40 minutes from me and made a point of coming by at least once a week. Her name is Patricia. She goes by Trish. She was 41 at the time all of this started. She'd always been the organized one, the one who remembered birthdays, who sent thank you notes, who kept a color-coded calendar on her phone and actually used it. When Carol was sick, Trish was the one who scheduled appointments, kept track of medications, coordinated with the doctors. She was good at it. She was efficient. And after Carol was gone, it felt natural when she offered to help me manage a few things. "Dad, you've got a lot on your plate," she told me one evening, sitting at this same kitchen table. "Let me help with the bills, okay? Just until you find your footing. You've got enough to worry about." I remember thinking how lucky I was to have her. Carol and I had done well for ourselves over the years. Not rich, not by any measure, but comfortable. We'd paid off the house. We had savings. I had my pension and Social Security. Carol had a small life insurance policy that paid out after she passed. All told, I had enough to live out the rest of my life without worry. Maybe leave something for the kids and the grandchildren. That was all I ever wanted. To not be a burden. To leave something behind. I gave Trish access to my checking account so she could help pay the bills online. She set up automatic payments for utilities. She started picking up my mail when she visited and sorting through it for me, leaving what she called the important stuff on the counter. The rest, she said she'd take care of. I didn't think twice about any of it. The first sign came about 6 months later, and I almost missed it entirely. I was looking for a birthday card. I keep a box of them in the top drawer of my desk, and I found a piece of mail that had been opened and then tucked underneath some old folders. A bank statement. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, except that the envelope had been resealed badly, like someone had tried to close it again and didn't quite manage it. I assumed it had just gotten bent in the mail. I pulled out the statement and set it on the desk, thinking I'd look at it later. That night, I did look at it. There were 4 withdrawals I didn't recognize. Each one was under $500. I stared at them for a while. My memory isn't perfect, and I thought maybe I'd forgotten something, a home repair, a check I wrote and forgot about. I set the statement aside and told myself I'd ask Trish about it the next time I saw her. But the next time she came, she brought lunch and a new bird feeder she'd picked up because she remembered I'd mentioned wanting one, and she helped me hang it off the back porch, and we sat outside drinking iced tea, and she asked me how I was sleeping and whether I was eating right. And the statement slipped my mind completely. 3 weeks later, I was reorganizing the filing cabinet, another thing Carol always managed, and I was trying to learn, and I pulled out a folder of recent bank statements that Trish had apparently been filing for me. There were 7 months' worth. She'd been organized about it, just like everything else. I sat down on the floor of the study, right there on the carpet, and I went through them one by one. By the time I finished, there was a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize in nearly every month. Not large ones, never large enough to be obvious. 300 here, 450 there. Once, 480, always just under 500. Over 7 months, It added up to just over $11,000. $11,000 I had no memory of spending. I went through my own memory carefully. Home repairs, I'd had the gutters cleaned and the furnace serviced, but I'd paid those by check and remembered writing them. Groceries, gas, my prescription copays. I could account for almost everything I'd spent. I could not account for $11,000 walking out of my account in amounts small enough not to trip any alarm. I didn't sleep that night. I want to be careful here about what I'm saying, because I know what it sounds like. This was my daughter. This was the person who held my hand in the hospital waiting room when they told me Carol wasn't going to make it. This was the person who cleaned out Carol's closet for me because I couldn't do it myself, who folded every sweater carefully and donated them to the women's shelter downtown because she knew Carol would have wanted that. I am not a man who jumps to conclusions about people he loves. So I did not call Trish. I did not confront her. Instead, the next morning, I drove to my bank. I asked to speak with someone about my account history. The young woman at the desk was patient with me. She pulled up my records on her screen and walked me through the past 8 months. And as she talked, something cold began to move through me. The withdrawals had been made at an ATM 2 towns over. Not my town, not Trish's town. A town I had no reason to visit and hadn't been to in at least 2 years. The withdrawals were made on weekday afternoons, mostly Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays were the days Trish usually came to check on me. I asked the bank representative a question I'd never expected to ask in my life. I asked her whether anyone else had ever been added to my account. She looked at her screen for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Gerald," she said carefully, "it looks like an authorized user was added about 8 months ago." She turned the screen slightly so I could see the name. It was Trish's full legal name, Patricia Ann Merritt. I don't remember driving home. I remember sitting in the driveway for a while before going inside. I remember the bird feeders swaying slightly in the November wind. I remember thinking about the day we hung it, about the iced tea, about how she'd asked if I was sleeping. I called my son that night. It was late his time, almost midnight. He answered on the second ring, the way he always does when I call late, because he knows I wouldn't call at that hour unless something was wrong. I told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, don't do anything yet. I'm coming." My son was there by Thursday afternoon. Together, we went back through the filing cabinet. This time, we weren't just looking at bank statements. We pulled everything: insurance documents, the deed to the house, the paperwork from Carol's life insurance policy. Most of it was in order. But at the back of the folder marked legal, behind a stack of old tax returns, there was a document I had never seen before. It was a durable power of attorney. It had my name on it. It had a signature on the line that was supposed to be mine, but I did not sign that document. I know my own signature. I have signed my name the same way for 50 years. The signature on that paper was close enough that you might not notice unless you were looking, but it was not mine. The loop on the G was wrong. The way the letters connected was wrong. The document gave Patricia Ann Merritt full legal authority to act on my behalf in all financial matters, including the ability to sell real property. My son sat back in his chair and put his hand over his mouth. "She can sell the house, Dad," he said quietly. "With this, she can sell the house." I looked around the kitchen. The wallpaper Carol and I had picked out together 22 years ago, still on the wall, a little faded, the tiny blue morning glories I'd always meant to replace but could never quite bring myself to. The dent in the baseboard near the back door where we'd moved the refrigerator in 1999 and misjudged the corner. The hook by the window where Carol always hung her reading glasses. I still hadn't moved that hook. I said, "Call a lawyer." We did not tell Trish anything. We didn't want to give her any reason to act before we understood the full picture. My son found an elder law attorney in Columbus who agreed to see us the next morning. We brought the bank statements, the power of attorney, and a letter from the bank confirming the authorized user edition. The attorney, a woman in her 50s who had clearly seen things like this before, went through the documents without much expression on her face. When she finished, she set them down and looked at me. "Mr. Gerald," she said, "this is financial elder abuse. What you're describing, the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized withdrawals, the pattern of keeping you from your own mail, these are textbook indicators." She explained what our options were. We could report to Adult Protective Services. We could file a complaint with the State Attorney General's office. We could pursue civil action to recover the funds. And if the power of attorney was indeed forged, there was potential for criminal fraud charges. She also told me to go to the bank immediately and revoke all authorized access. We did that on the way home. That evening, my son and I sat in the living room. The house was very quiet. He asked me if I wanted to be the one to call her, or if he should. I thought about it for a while. I said I'd do it. I called Trish the next morning. I kept my voice as normal as I could. I told her I'd been going through some paperwork and had a few questions. I asked her to come by. She said she'd be there by noon. She sounded perfectly at ease. Cheerful, even. She said she'd stop and pick up sandwiches. She arrived with turkey clubs and a bag of chips and a smile that I'd known since she was 7 years old. She set the food on the table. She poured herself a glass of water. She asked if I was feeling okay because I seemed a little tired. Then she saw the documents laid out on the kitchen table. She didn't say anything right away. She stood very still, looking at them. And in the silence, something shifted in her face, something I can only describe as the expression of a person who has been caught and knows it and is now calculating. Not guilty. Calculating. "Dad," she started. "I want to understand," I said. I kept my voice steady. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, keeping my voice steady in that moment. "I want you to explain to me what this is." She tried. She tried for almost 20 minutes. She said the power of attorney was something I'd agreed to when I was upset after Carol died and had just forgotten. She said the withdrawals were for home expenses she'd paid in cash on my behalf, and she had receipts. She just hadn't brought them. She said she'd been protecting me. She said she did everything out of love. Not once did she say she was sorry. When she finished, I looked at her for a long time. I thought about all the times she'd sorted my mail, all the statements she'd filed away from me, that she'd assumed I'd never look at too closely. All the Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, 2 towns over at an ATM machine. "The attorney says the signature on this document isn't mine," I said. "The bank says you added yourself to my account, and I never agreed to any of this," she said. "Dad, I think you're confused." My son walked in from the hallway. He'd been there the whole time. Trish looked at him. Then she looked back at me. She seemed to understand then that there was no version of this conversation where things ended easily. She left without finishing her sandwich. The weeks that followed were not simple. Nothing about this kind of thing is simple. Adult Protective Services opened a case. The Attorney General's office began reviewing the documents. My bank worked with us to identify every transaction Trish had made. The total, by the time they finished, was just over $19,000 over a 10-month period. The power of attorney was sent for forensic handwriting analysis. There were family members who called me. Carol's sister, who told me I was tearing the family apart. A cousin who said I should have handled this privately. People who meant well but understood very little. My son stayed for 3 weeks. He made sure I ate. He watched the Ohio State game with me on a Saturday afternoon and didn't mention any of it for 4 hours, which was the best thing he could have done. One morning, about 6 weeks after all of this started, I was sitting at the kitchen table early, before sunrise, with a cup of coffee. I'd been sleeping badly. I was thinking about Trish as a child, 7 or 8 years old, sitting at this same table doing homework, her tongue pressed to her upper lip the way she did when she was concentrating. Carol used to say she got that from me. I don't know if it's true. I can't remember doing it. I thought about the woman who stood in this kitchen 3 weeks ago and told me I was confused. I've been a teacher for 31 years. I've watched young people make decisions they thought nobody would notice. I've seen the look on a student's face when they realize the teacher knows. It's a specific look. Trish had that look. What I hadn't expected was that it would hurt the same coming from my own daughter as it did from a 16-year-old caught cheating on a test. It should have been different. It wasn't. Betrayal doesn't change its shape depending on who's doing it. The handwriting analysis came back. The signature was confirmed to be a forgery. Trish was charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person, forgery, and unauthorized use of financial accounts. Those are serious charges in Ohio. Her attorney called my attorney. There were conversations I wasn't part of. At some point, I was told a plea agreement was being discussed. I told my attorney I wanted a full accounting of every dollar. I wanted it documented. I wanted it on record, not for my sake alone, but because I knew and my attorney confirmed that what Trish did to me, she was capable of doing again. to someone else. To someone who didn't have a son who answered his phone at midnight, Trish entered a plea. She paid back the full amount. She received a suspended sentence, probation, and mandatory financial counseling. Whether that was the right outcome, I'll leave for others to judge. I'm not a judge. I was a history teacher. I know that how things end up on paper and how they feel in your chest are rarely the same. I changed the locks on my house. I set up a separate account at a different bank. I enrolled in an online service that alerts me to every transaction over $50. I started reading my own mail. My son calls every Sunday. We talk for a long time now, not just 10 or 15 minutes like before. He's been worried in a way he's trying not to show. I tell him I'm okay, and mostly that's true. The bird feeder is still up. I didn't take it down. Carol would have thought it was silly to punish the birds. There's something nobody tells you about getting older. People assume that because you've lived a long time, you're harder to hurt, that the losses stack up and you build a kind of armor. What I've found is that the opposite is true. When you're younger, you have time on your side. You have the option of starting over, of rewriting the story. When you're 63 and your daughter looks you in the face and tells you you're confused, you don't have the luxury of a long future in which this becomes a small thing. It is a large thing, and it takes up a lot of space. But I want to say something to anyone watching this who might be in a similar situation, anyone who has noticed something that doesn't add up, who has been brushed off or told they're remembering wrong, who has found a piece of mail that was opened before they could get to it. Trust what you notice. Write it down. Get to your bank. Talk to someone outside the family. Call Adult Protective Services, or have someone help you do it. The number is there. Use it. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the person who is counting on your silence to keep doing what they're doing. You deserve to understand your own life. You earned every dollar you saved. You earned the house you live in and the peace you were supposed to have in the years you worked toward. Don't let anyone tell you you're confused when you know what you saw.